Before starting, I would like to thank you for your love and support for me. We are at 120 subscribers, thank you all. Consider subscribing to listen to more thrilling stories. Now let us start. Our training prepared us for anything human. Ambushes, guerrilla warfare, the kind of messy combat that throws the rulebook out the window. We were the Brazilian Special Operations Command, the COP-SP. The jungle was our backyard. We knew its heat, its crushing humidity, its predators. We thought we were the apex predators there. But there's no training for an enemy that can turn the jungle itself into a weapon. An enemy that can twist space and time. We weren't just being hunted. Our very reality was being torn apart, piece by agonizing piece. This is the story of Operation Serpent's Tooth. If you look it up, the official records will tell you it never happened. After what I saw, I get it. Some truths are just too terrifying to acknowledge. My name was Sergeant First Class Mateo. That man, the one who believed in the chain of command, in the solid ground beneath his boots. He doesn't exist anymore. The man I am now believes in only one thing: the shimmer. It started like these things always seem to, with a mission that looked routine on paper. Operação Dente de Serpente. Our objective was to find and neutralize a rogue faction deep in the unmapped parts of the Amazon. They called themselves the Ouroboros Disciples. Intel was spotty, but it painted a picture of a cult built around a disgraced anthropologist, Elias Thorne. Thorne had been kicked out of academia for his radical theories about dimensional intersections, using local folklore for what he called ontological warfare. The official line was they were an armed separatist group, maybe tied to narco-terrorists. Standard stuff. Dangerous, sure, but something we knew how to handle. But there were whispers, the kind that get passed between bunks late at night. Rumors that Thorne wasn't just hiding in the jungle, he was listening to it. That he'd found something ancient and powerful and was trying to turn it into a weapon. We laughed it off. We were soldiers, not mystics. Our guns were made of steel and polymer, not myths. There were 12 of us, the best of the best. Each man a specialist in jungle warfare and long-range recon. Our leader was Captain Ribeiro, a man so steady you could set a compass to him. His number 2 was Lieutenant Costa, sharp, by the book. Then you had guys like Santiago, our comms wizard. Almeida, the heavy weapons guy who was unnaturally calm under fire. Silva, our medic, a man of pure science and reason. And the rest of us, each a hardened pro who had stared death down a dozen times. We thought we were invincible. We were so wrong. We dropped in by chopper at the edge of the AO, a sea of green so thick it looked solid from the air. The second the rotor's roar faded, the sound of the jungle just swallowed us whole. 1 million insects, 1,000 unseen birds, the cry of a distant monkey. It was a living, breathing thing, and from the first step, it felt wrong. The heat was a physical presence. The air so thick and wet you had to think about every breath. That was normal. What wasn't normal were the pockets of absolute silence. We'd be pushing through this wall of animal noise. And then, for 100 feet, nothing. Not a bug, not a bird. Just our own breathing and the squelch of our boots in the mud. Then, like a switch was flipped, the sound would crash back in. It was Santiago who first noticed the gear going haywire. "Captain," he said, his voice tight, "my compass is spinning. GPS is a ghost. I can't get a lock." Ribeiro pulled out his own analog compass. The needle was trembling, dancing between north and south like it was scared of both. "Magnetic interference," he said, his voice a rock of calm in the middle of our growing worry. "Big iron deposit, probably. We'll navigate by the sun and terrain." We all went with it. It was a logical, military explanation. It kept the fear down. But how do you explain the trees? We passed a grove of old ceiba trees, and their bark seemed to glow with faint geometric patterns, like glowing circuitry right under the skin. Silva knelt and scraped off a sample. "Just some kind of phosphorescent fungus," he said, but his hands were shaking. The humidity must be causing a weird reaction. The worst of it, though, was the shimmering. You'd catch it out of the corner of your eye, a patch of air that rippled and distorted, like heat haze off asphalt. But it was cool in the shade. The first time I got a good look at it, I stopped cold. A wall of ferns and vines about 20 meters ahead of us just seemed to fold. The light bent around it, creating this impossible brief lens that showed us the same spot, but from a different angle, before it snapped back. "You see that?" I whispered to Almeida, who was on point. He just nodded, his eyes wide. "Heat haze," he muttered, but neither of us believed it. It was becoming our mantra, our little shield against a reality that was starting to come apart. We made camp the first night, a tight perimeter. That dead silence fell over us again, heavier this time. We ate cold rations, nobody willing to risk a fire. Every snap of a twig sounded like a gunshot. It felt like we were inside a bell jar, and something was outside tapping on the glass. Later that night, on watch, I saw it. A figure standing just past the range of my night vision. It wasn't human. The shape was wrong, too tall, too thin, and it shimmered. Not like heat haze. It looked like it was made of liquid crystal, constantly dissolving and reforming. I raised my rifle, heart pounding. I blinked, and it was gone. I didn't tell Ribeiro when my watch was over. What was I going to say? I saw a ghost? That the jungle was messing with my head? I was a special operator. I dealt with real threats. But as I tried to get some sleep, a cold dread settled deep in my stomach. We were being watched. And whatever was watching us wasn't playing by any rules we understood. We were supposed to be the hunters, but we were the ones being stalked. Day 2, the wrongness got worse. We found the first sign of Thorn's disciples, and it did nothing to calm us down. It was a camp, but it looked less like a hideout and more like a sacrificial site. It was completely abandoned. Tents stood empty, half-eaten food was rotting on plates, and complex research gear, magnetometers, spectrum analyzers, strange antennas, was scattered everywhere, like they'd all just vanished in the middle of their work. Carved into every tree around the camp were those same spiraling geometric symbols we'd seen glowing before. They hurt to look at. In the center of the camp was a pit full of ash and charred bits of things I couldn't recognize. The air itself was humming, a low subsonic thrum that vibrated in your bones. Santiago ripped his headset off. "Captain, this is impossible," he said, his face pale. "I'm picking up radio chatter. But it's us. It's our comms traffic from yesterday. And I think from tomorrow." Ribeiro just stared at him. "Explain, Santiago." "I can't. I'm hearing echoes. My gear's picking up conversations we haven't had yet. Little pieces. Costa warning about a river. A scream from Silva." Santiago's voice cracked. Silva, standing nearby, looked like he'd just seen a ghost. This was way beyond iron deposits. This was something else. Ribeiro made the call. "Pack it up. We're moving. We find Thorn, we end this, and we get out." His voice was iron, but for the first time, I saw a flicker of doubt in his eyes. As we moved out, the jungle started to fight us. A stream that was a thin blue line on our map was now a raging 50-meter-wide river. A clear game trail we were following suddenly looped back on itself, leading us to a clearing we'd left an hour earlier. It was like the geometry of the place was fluid, and our navigation training was useless when the landscape itself was the enemy. That afternoon, the psychological attack started. It was subtle at first, a faint scent on the wind, the perfume a man's wife wore, the smell of a childhood meal, a sound you couldn't quite catch, a baby's laugh, a mother calling your name. It was probing us, digging through our minds, looking for our weaknesses. Then it got PFC Mendez, our youngest, barely 20. He stopped dead, staring at a bamboo thicket. "Isabella," he whispered, his sister. "She died in a car crash 2 years ago." He took a step toward the bamboo, his face a mask of desperate hope. "Mendez, stand down!" Costa yelled, grabbing his arm. "But it's her! I can see her!" Mendez cried, fighting him. There was nothing there. We saw nothing. But for him, it was real. It took 2 men to hold him back while he sobbed, screaming her name. And that's when the shimmer came back. Not on the edges, but right in our path. A column of air about 30 feet high started to twist and warp. The trees behind it bent like they were made of wax. The sound of the jungle got sucked away, replaced by a deafening, high-pitched whine. We all raised our rifles on instinct, our training kicking in even as our brains were screaming. "Hold your fire," Ribeiro commanded, his voice strained. "We don't know what it is." From inside the shimmer, figures started walking out. At first they looked like Thorne's cultists, just shapes in rags holding rifles. Almeida, who never hesitated, opened fire. His machine gun roared, and the rounds tore through the air right at the lead figure, and went straight through it. The bullets didn't hit or ricochet. They just vanished into the shape. It didn't even flinch. It just kept coming, and as it got closer, its form sharpened. It wasn't a cultist. Its face was a screaming, twisted copy of Almeida's own. The other figures changed too, each one becoming a distorted doppelganger of one of us, their faces frozen in pure terror. That's what broke us. Seeing our own terrified faces charging at us. Men started screaming, firing wildly at the ghosts, their bullets doing nothing. Others just backed away, lost in disbelief. Silva, our medic, the voice of reason, was scrambling for an explanation. "Mass hallucination! It's gotta be psychotropic pollen, mixed with the infrasound." A scream from Santiago cut him off. He was pointing up into the canopy. A thick vine was glowing with a fiery, incandescent light, coiling like a serpent made of pure flame. "Boitata!" Santiago shrieked, stumbling back, naming the fire serpent from old Amazonian myths. The entity was pulling the old fears out of us, the campfire stories our grandmothers told us, and making them real. Another soldier, Ferreira, pointed at the ground, his face white. "Curupira!" he stammered. In the mud, footprints were appearing one by one, walking toward him, human-shaped, but the toes pointed backward. The forest spirit that leads men to their doom. Panic ripped through the unit like a virus. It wasn't just showing us things, it was making us feel the terror they brought. Santiago's fear of the Boitata became a wave of primal dread that washed over all of us. Our own minds had been turned against us. We were trapped in a prison of our own fears, and the walls were closing in fast. Ribeiro, God bless him, was a rock. He tried to pull us back together, his voice cut through the chaos. "Fall back, defensive circle, now." We tried. We scrambled back, but the jungle fought us. Roots snaked up to trip us. Thorny vines lashed out and grabbed our gear. It felt like we were wading through invisible tar. Every step was a struggle. What should have been a 20-meter retreat felt like a mile. When we finally formed a ragged back-to-back circle, the attack changed again. The shimmer wasn't just in columns or figures anymore. It was everywhere, a distortion that made the whole jungle around us look like it was breathing. The world felt like a pane of glass that was being hit with a hammer, over and over. The doppelgangers vanished, replaced by something worse. The entity started messing with the physical world. A tiny creek nearby suddenly swelled, its water flowing uphill, straight at us. Trees bent at impossible angles, their branches twisting to block our shots. Then it got Silva. Our medic, our man of logic, suddenly let out a scream of pure, raw agony. He grabbed his head, his eyes wide with a terror that wasn't from this world. "It's in my head," he shrieked. "It's showing me everything at once. Every angle, every possibility, every second of my life. Past and future. All at the same time." It was feeding him everything at once. Every sight, every sound. His entire life crammed into a single second. It just broke him. He collapsed, convulsing, blood trickling from his nose and ears. Almeida ran to him, but as he knelt, a ripple of shimmering energy washed over him. We all saw it. For a split second, Almeida's body went translucent, like he was made of glowing geometric shapes. He looked down at his own hands in disbelief as they started to dissolve. He opened his mouth to scream, but there was no sound. He just came apart. A cloud of glowing dust. And then, nothing. Almeida was just gone. That's when our discipline completely shattered. This wasn't a fight, it was an execution. How do you shoot something that can delete you from reality? The attacks got more personal, crueler. It ripped memories from our heads and weaponized them. I saw my father, dead 10 years, standing right in front of me, his face filled with disappointment. "You failed, Mateo," he said, his voice a perfect copy. "You always fail." It hit me harder than any bullet could. Next to me, Costa was on his knees, staring at the spot where Almeida had been. The shimmer was gathering around him now, but it wasn't dissolving him. His gear started to rust before our eyes, his fatigues crumbling to rags. His skin wrinkled, his hair went white and fell out, his body withered. In 10 seconds, he aged 50 years, collapsing into a pile of dust and bones. He died of old age, right there in front of us. The terror was absolute. Some guys were just firing blindly into the jungle. Others were frozen, catatonic. A few were just running, screaming. Through it all, Ribeiro was still trying to find a target. His face was a grim mask of determination. "The source!" he bellowed. "There has to be a source, a focal point. Santiago, get a reading. Anything." Santiago, shaking, fumbled with his wrecked equipment. "Everywhere. It's coming from everywhere. But there's a nexus, a concentration. North of here. Half a click maybe. The readings, they're off the charts." It was a suicide run, but it was better than waiting to be unmade. "On me!" Ribeiro yelled, grabbing the last 2 grenades off his vest. "We're going to the source. We end this, one way or another." Only 4 of us were left who could still function. Ribeiro, Santiago, me, and a quiet rifleman named Barros. The 4 of us against an enemy that could bend reality. We ran. We ran straight into the heart of the nightmare. That half-kilometer run to the source was a trip through hell. The jungle was no longer passive. It was an active enemy. The ground turned to liquid mud, sucking at our boots. Trees we tried to use for cover melted into shimmering light. The air filled with the ghostly screams of our fallen friends. We saw things, glimpses of other places, other times, flashing in the distorted air. A bustling city street from 100 years ago, silent and gray. A red desert under 2 suns. For a split second I saw our chopper, not on a landing pad, but tangled in the trees, burning. A preview of a future we hadn't met yet. Reality was coming apart. Barros was next. He was running just ahead of me when he suddenly stopped. He looked down at his hands as he started to shrink. Not getting younger like Costa, just smaller. His uniform, his rifle, everything scaled down with him. He cried out, his voice getting higher and higher until he was the size of a child, then a baby. He looked up at us with these huge, terrified baby eyes, and then just winked out of existence. Not gone, more like unwritten from the start. It was just the 3 of us. Ribeiro, Santiago, and me. We burst through a final, unnatural wall of vines and stumbled into a clearing. The source. It was a perfect circle of scorched black earth, 100 meters across. In the very center stood a single, massive, ancient tree. The entire clearing was contained in a dome of shimmering, prismatic energy. Looking through it was like looking through a broken kaleidoscope. Inside that dome, physics was on vacation. Chunks of rock floated in the air. Leaves burned with a cold white fire. Time was shattered. We could see the central tree as a sapling, a giant and a petrified husk, all at the same time. At the base of the tree was Elias Thorne, or what was left of him. He was a statue of gray, porous stone, kneeling, his face frozen in a look of ecstatic horror. Around him were his disciples, all petrified the same way. They weren't trying to weaponize this thing. They were trying to worship it. They were its first meal. And floating above Thorne like a black star was the heart of it all. It wasn't a creature. It was a hole in reality, a man-sized sphere of pure, chaotic energy, churning with impossible colors. Staring at it was like looking into the mind of a god that had gone completely, utterly insane. "Santiago, can we disrupt it?" Ribeiro yelled over the mind-splitting hum. Santiago frantically worked his console. "I don't know. It's not matter. It's not energy. It's both. It's a localized paradox. But there's a resonance. If we could hit it with a focused EMP..." "We don't have an EMP!" I screamed back. "Our grenades!" Ribeiro cut in, his eyes wild, holding up the 2 frags. "The detonation creates a dirty EM burst. It's nothing, but it's all we've got. It might destabilize it." It was a firecracker against a hurricane. But it was our only shot. "Cover me!" Ribeiro ordered. He primed the first grenade and started running toward the sphere of madness. The moment he entered the dome, reality bent. We saw 3 of him at once, one running forward, one standing still, already turning to stone. A third was on the ground in a bloody heap. He threw the first grenade. It wobbled through the air as space itself tried to reject it. It landed near the tree and detonated. There was no sound. The flash was just sucked into the anomaly. The sphere pulsed violently, and for a second, the jungle around us ripped open, revealing a black, star-filled void. Ribeiro was still moving, 10 meters from the sphere. He primed the second grenade, his arm cocked back. But the entity struck. A tendril of pure distortion lashed out and touched him. He didn't dissolve or age. He just stopped, frozen in time, mid-throw. A perfect statue of a soldier in his last act of defiance. Santiago let out a sob. It was over. We'd failed. But then the impossible happened. The grenade in Ribeiro's frozen hand just fell. Time seemed to lurch forward for that one single object. It dropped from his unmoving fingers, rolled a few feet, and stopped directly beneath the pulsating sphere. The 5-second fuse. In the fractured time of that dome, had it been 5 seconds? 5 minutes? An eternity? The grenade detonated. This time, the effect was different. The tiny EM pulse must have hit that exact resonant frequency. The sphere screamed. A psychic shriek that tore through our skulls and dropped us to our knees. It flared brighter than the sun, then collapsed in on itself with a deafening, silent implosion. The shimmer vanished. The floating rocks crashed to the ground. The cold fire on the leaves went out. The humming stopped. Silence. The clearing was just a clearing. Scorched, filled with stone statues of men. But it was normal. The air was just air. The trees were just trees. Santiago and I stared at the spot where the anomaly had been. Nothing. We looked at Ribeiro, a statue forever reaching for his target. We were alive. We had survived. But we were alone. Completely and utterly alone in the heart of the Amazon, with the ghosts of 9 comrades and a secret that could never be told. The journey back was a hollow, silent blur. We didn't talk. We just walked, fueled by a desperate need to leave that cursed place behind. We walked for 2 days until, by some miracle, we stumbled onto a river and were picked up by a routine army patrol miles outside our supposed operational area. Our appearance told its own story. Gaunt, shredded gear, and a vacant 1,000-yard stare that unsettled even the combat vets who found us. We were separated immediately and flown to a secure military medical facility in Brasilia. The debriefing wasn't a debriefing at all. It was an interrogation. The men questioning us weren't from our command. Quiet men in sterile uniforms with no insignia, from some agency I'd never heard of. They had the whole story written for us. They told us our team ran into a heavily armed drug cartel, that we were outnumbered. Comms failed because of solar flares. They said that in the deep jungle, some plants and fungi can release powerful hallucinogens, causing mass psychosis. They told us Captain Ribeiro, Lieutenant Costa, and 7 others had died heroically. They showed us the after-action report, full of fabricated firefight details. The official story was that Santiago and I got separated and were suffering from severe PTSD. We tried to tell them the truth. I talked about the shimmering, about men turning to dust. Santiago tried to explain the temporal paradoxes. They just nodded patiently. Then, one of them slid a file across the table. "Sergeant," he said calmly, "you and Specialist Santiago have been through a traumatic ordeal. The mind does strange things. We're giving you both honorable discharges, full pensions. But you will sign this non-disclosure agreement. The official story is the only story. Operation Serpent's Tooth is now a matter of national security." The threat was clear. The real horror, though, didn't hit me until a week later. I tried to call Almeida's widow to offer my condolences. The number was disconnected. I looked for her online. Nothing. I looked for any record of Almeida himself. Nothing. It was like he'd never existed. Panicked, I searched for the others. Silva, Ferreira, Mendez. Gone. Not just classified. Their birth certificates, school records, family photos I had seen with my own eyes. All vanished. I called Santiago, trembling. He'd found the same thing. This wasn't just a cover-up. They hadn't just classified the files, they deleted the men, plucked them right out of the timeline. The entity's effect had rippled out, or maybe the men in the sterile uniforms had their own way of erasing things. Elias Thorne, the Ouroboros disciples, no record they ever existed either. The whole reason we went into that green hell was a ghost story. Santiago and I were the only ones left, the only proof those 9 men ever lived. And that's the heaviest burden of all. So now I live a quiet life. New name, new town, far from anything that looks like that jungle. The government kept its promise. The money shows up in my bank account. But I'm a prisoner all the same. A ghost living a life that isn't mine. I don't sleep much. When I do, I see the shimmer. I see Almeida dissolving into light, Costa withering to dust, Ribeiro frozen forever. Sometimes at the edge of my vision, in a reflection or the heat haze off a road, I see it. A flicker, a distortion, a ripple in the world. I know it's still out there. Or maybe it's not out there at all. Maybe that hole in the universe we found wasn't a door to somewhere else, but a tear in our own reality, letting the madness leak through. We put a bandage on a wound that can't be healed. We pulled back the curtain on reality, and what's hiding back there is just mindless, screaming chaos. Our training, our weapons, our courage. It meant nothing. We were just insects that noticed the boot right before it came down. I don't know what Thorne found in that jungle, but I know it's not finished. Some doors, once opened, can never really be closed again. Thanks for listening. I know it's unbelievable, but some stories have to be told. The world is full of dark corners, and sometimes those shadows stare back. If you want to hear more accounts like this, more reports from the fringe, subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell. Stay safe out there, and be careful what you go looking for in the dark. You just might find it.